The sun had barely risen over the quaint rooftops of St. Mary Mead, casting a soft golden glow on the cobblestone streets. The village, usually quiet at this hour, seemed to hold its breath, as if it knew that today would be unlike any other. Behind the neatly trimmed hedges and ivy-draped cottages, whispers had already begun to circulate. Someone important had disappeared overnight. Miss Jane Marple, with her sharp eyes and keen intuition, sat in her cozy drawing-room, quietly sipping her morning tea. Her knitting needles clicked softly, punctuating the stillness of the room. Though the village often seemed tranquil, Miss Marple knew better than to trust appearances. Beneath the polite greetings and gentle smiles, secrets lingered, and where secrets hid, trouble was never far behind. Today, a sense of unease had crept into the village. Lady Constance Aldridge, the young heiress of the Aldridge estate, had vanished without a trace. The manor gates stood wide open. Servants were puzzled, and no note had been left to explain her disappearance. The villagers speculated wildly. Some whispered of elopement, others murmured darker thoughts. But Miss Marple sensed that the truth was far more intricate. The detective's mind began to piece together the fragments of information she had gathered in the past few hours. Lady Constance had received a mysterious letter the night before. A carriage had been spotted near the manor at an unusual hour, and certain members of the household staff were curiously evasive when questioned. Every detail, however small, was a thread, and Miss Marple's skill lay in weaving these threads into a tapestry revealing the hidden design. As she stood by the window, her gaze sweeping the familiar streets of St. Mary Mead, she felt the familiar thrill of anticipation. A mystery had arrived at her doorstep, and she was ready. Yet she also understood the stakes. Every hour that passed increased the risk to Lady Constance. With quiet determination, Miss Marple set aside her tea, donned her hat and shawl, and stepped into the crisp morning air. The village was waking, unaware that its serene facades would soon be pierced by revelations of deceit, betrayal, and cunning. Miss Marple, small in stature but formidable in intellect, moved through the lanes with a careful grace, observing every gesture, overhearing every whispered word, and noting every unusual detail. In the world of St. Mary Mead, nothing escaped her notice, and nothing remained hidden for long. This story will follow Miss Marple as she untangles a web of secrets surrounding the vanishing heiress. Every chapter reveals new clues, suspicious characters, and surprising twists. Will Miss Marple uncover the truth before it's too late? The village holds its breath, and so should you. Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction inspired by the Miss Marple universe. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Can you spot the clues before Miss Marple? Comment below with your guesses as we uncover the mystery together. The sun had fully risen, bathing St. Mary Mead in warm morning light. Yet the village still held an air of tension. Word of Lady Constance Aldridge's disappearance had spread quickly, and villagers gathered in small clusters, whispering theories that ranged from the mundane to the outrageous. Miss Marple walked slowly down the lane leading to the Aldridge Manor, her eyes scanning every detail. Even in the stillness of a village morning, nothing escaped her notice. The hedges, usually immaculately trimmed, bore signs of hurried neglect. A servant's basket had been left unattended, and the manor gates, though closed, showed faint marks of being forced open. As she approached the grand house, the household staff were in a state of disarray. The butler, a stern man named Mr. Hargreaves, attempted to maintain order, but the worry etched on his face betrayed him. "Miss Marple," he greeted her, voice tight. "We are at our wits' end. Lady Constance vanished overnight. No note, no clue. We don't know where to begin." Miss Marple nodded calmly. "Tell me exactly what happened last night. Every detail matters." The butler hesitated, then recounted the previous evening. Lady Constance had dined quietly in the main hall, as usual, and retired to her chambers shortly after. No unusual visitors were reported, though a servant mentioned seeing a shadow near the east wing window. By morning her bed was untouched, and her absence immediately noticed. "Was anything taken?" Miss Marple asked, her sharp gaze sweeping the room. "Nothing, madam. Her jewelry, her personal effects, all untouched. It is as though she simply vanished." Miss Marple's mind worked rapidly. A disappearance with no sign of theft, no obvious motive. This was a delicate puzzle. She began her preliminary inspection of the room. The curtains were slightly askew, suggesting they had been opened hastily. The window latch showed a faint scratch, barely noticeable, as if someone had tried to manipulate it from the outside. Outside, the garden staff and a few curious villagers gathered, eyes wide with speculation. Miss Marple moved discreetly among them, listening, observing, and quietly noting expressions, gestures, and tone of voice. Even the smallest reactions could hold significant clues. One gardener, a timid young man named Thomas, seemed unusually nervous when asked about the previous night. Another, Mrs. Wilkins, the cook, hinted at hearing muffled voices, though she couldn't say for certain who they belonged to. Miss Marple returned to the house to examine Lady Constance's personal effects. A small, unopened letter lay on her writing desk, the seal intact. She carefully examined it, noting the paper's texture, the handwriting, and the faint scent of perfume that lingered. This, she thought, could be a key piece of the puzzle. In the midst of her inspection, a sharp sound from the front gate drew her attention. A carriage had arrived, carrying Inspector Craddock, summoned by the family in their growing panic. He greeted Miss Marple with a nod, aware of her reputation for solving the village's most complex mysteries. "Miss Marple," he said, "we could use your insight. There's nothing to go on, and yet I feel we are missing something obvious." Together they reviewed the layout of the manor, the timing of last night's events, and the scattered statements of the staff. Miss Marple's eyes lit up as she connected a few subtle hints: the disturbed curtains, the faint scratch on the window latch, the gardener's nervousness, and the mysterious letter. Each clue was a thread, and she began weaving them into a pattern only she could see. The chapter ended with Miss Marple stepping out into the garden, her mind racing. Something about the east wing window, the timing of the gardener's observations, and the untouched belongings didn't sit right with her. The village seemed calm from the outside, but she knew danger, or at least secrets, lurked beneath the surface. Can you spot the clue Miss Marple noticed first? Comment your guess before the next chapter reveals more. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the Aldridge Manor, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. Miss Marple, accompanied by Inspector Craddock, began her careful examination of the east wing, the area Lady Constance had occupied the previous evening. The corridor was unusually quiet, yet Miss Marple sensed the subtle tension in the air, as if the very walls held their breath. The east wing had always been the most private section of the manor. Lady Constance's rooms were furnished with elegant simplicity: a four-poster bed, a writing desk, and shelves lined with books whose spines gleamed in the morning light. Miss Marple's sharp eyes swept the room, noting every detail: the way the curtains were slightly uneven, the small indentations on the carpet, even the precise arrangement of the personal belongings on the dresser. Nothing was truly random. Everything spoke, if one knew how to listen. She moved to the writing desk where the unopened letter had been found. Carefully, she examined its seal, noting the faint perfume that lingered. "The sender wishes to communicate without revealing themselves," she murmured to Craddock. "And that tells us something about the nature of the threat or the plan." Their attention shifted to the window. The latch showed a small scratch, barely noticeable to an untrained eye. Miss Marple crouched, inspecting it closely. "It appears someone attempted entry or exit through here," she noted. "But they were cautious, almost delicate. Whoever it was didn't want to leave evidence." Outside, the garden below the east wing window appeared undisturbed. Yet Miss Marple spotted faint footprints near the flower beds, partially hidden by morning dew. They were small, delicate, likely a woman's, but careful, as though someone had tried to erase their presence after passing. Returning to the corridor, Miss Marple paused at a closed door. She sensed tension behind it, though the room was meant to be empty. She listened, catching the faintest rustle of fabric. "Someone is hiding, or someone has hidden something here," she said softly. Craddock frowned, clearly impressed by her instinct. The household staff had gathered at the foot of the stairs, nervously awaiting news. Miss Marple addressed them gently, knowing that even the smallest observation might yield clues. "Who last saw Lady Constance last night?" she asked. One by one, they recounted their actions. The maid mentioned delivering a late-night tray of tea to her mistress, and how she had noticed an unfamiliar shadow moving past the corridor. The gardener, still fidgeting with his cap, claimed he had heard faint footsteps near the east wing windows, though he wasn't sure if it was Lady Constance or someone else. Miss Marple's mind raced, connecting these seemingly minor details. The letter, the shadow, the careful footsteps, the disturbed window latch. They formed a pattern, though its full meaning remained hidden. She knew it would take patience, observation, and a delicate touch to unravel it. Suddenly, a faint sound caught her attention, a soft tapping from the far end of the corridor. Miss Marple paused, her ears attuned to the rhythm. Craddock moved closer, cautious. Together they approached the source, a small cabinet tucked in the corner, slightly ajar. Inside, they found a bundle of Lady Constance's belongings, hastily packed but carefully concealed. Among them was a diary, its pages filled with neat handwriting, recounting her daily life, her thoughts, and subtle hints about the mysterious letter she had received. Miss Marple carefully flipped through the pages. Certain entries stood out, mentions of secret meetings, unexpected visitors, and cryptic comments about trust and betrayal. Each line was a clue, each word a thread in the growing tapestry of the mystery. By the time the morning had progressed into midday, Miss Marple had pieced together a preliminary theory. Lady Constance's disappearance was not a random act of misfortune. It was carefully orchestrated, involving someone close to the household, or at least someone who knew its routines intimately. The village's calm exterior masked a complexity that only Miss Marple could untangle. As the chapter drew to a close, Miss Marple sat by the window, diary in hand, eyes scanning the distant horizon of St. Mary Mead. She felt the first stirrings of a plan. The next steps would require caution, subtle questioning, and sharp observation. The mystery of the vanishing heiress was far from over, but the first pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place. What do you think Lady Constance wrote in her diary that could help solve the mystery? Share your thoughts. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across St. Mary Mead, and the village, though outwardly serene, seemed to hum with anticipation. Miss Marple, having spent the morning scrutinizing the East Wing and Lady Constance's diary, felt the pieces of the puzzle beginning to shift, but not yet align completely. A sudden knock at the manor door drew her attention. The butler, Mr. Hargreaves, opened it to reveal a visitor unfamiliar to the household. A tall, sharply dressed man with an air of quiet authority. He introduced himself as Mr. Elliot Carrington, a solicitor claiming to have urgent business concerning Lady Constance's affairs. His presence was unexpected and unusual, and Miss Marple's keen eyes immediately noted the slight tension in his posture, the careful avoidance of eye contact with the staff, and the small, polished black case he carried. "Miss Marple," Inspector Craddock said under his breath, "this may be significant. Someone arriving unannounced with legal authority. It might complicate things, or illuminate them." Miss Marple nodded subtly, observing Mr. Carrington as he paced the manor's foyer. He spoke with measured calm, inquiring about Lady Constance's disappearance, yet his questions revealed knowledge of details that had not been made public. He asked about the timing of her last known movements, the servants' accounts, and even specifics about the East Wing window. Miss Marple decided to engage him in conversation. "You seem well informed, Mr. Carrington. How did you come by such precise details?" she asked, her tone light yet probing. Mr. Carrington hesitated, then smiled faintly. "A solicitor must know the facts, Miss Marple. I handle affairs for the Aldridge family, and I am concerned about any complications regarding her estate." Yet Miss Marple could sense a subtle unease beneath the polished exterior. Something about him did not sit right. The carefully rehearsed words, the almost imperceptible glances at the staff, and the occasional tightening of his jaw. Every detail she knew was worth noting. Later she found herself alone in the garden with the diary. Leafing through its pages once more, she discovered a passage that might explain Mr. Carrington's sudden appearance. Lady Constance had written about a meeting with a stranger who claimed he could assist her with a delicate matter of inheritance. The diary entry was vague, but suggested caution. Miss Marple's mind clicked. Perhaps Mr. Carrington was that very stranger, or perhaps something more sinister. Meanwhile, the household staff whispered among themselves, wary of the visitor. The maid, anxious and fidgeting, hinted at overhearing late-night conversations that Lady Constance had had with an unknown figure near the East Wing. The gardener, who had previously seemed timid, now admitted to noticing unfamiliar footprints leading toward the back garden, footprints that disappeared as suddenly as they had appeared. Miss Marple's deduction began to form. Lady Constance's disappearance, the diary's warnings, the unexpected visitor, and the mysterious footprints, all were pieces of a complex design. Whoever had orchestrated her vanishing knew the manor well, and perhaps counted on the confusion to conceal their intentions. By evening, the village's atmosphere had grown heavy with curiosity and speculation. Villagers lingered near the manor gates, their eyes tracking every movement of staff and guests alike. Miss Marple, however, moved with quiet purpose, methodically questioning staff and analyzing each detail. As the day ended, she stood near the manor's drawing-room window, diary in hand, deep in thought. She realized that uncovering the truth would require patience, subtle probing, and careful observation of the visitor, Mr. Carrington. There were questions to ask, connections to make, and small inconsistencies to uncover. Each clue brought her closer to the heart of the mystery, but danger and deception were never far behind. Who do you think Mr. Carrington really is? And why has he come to St. Mary Mead? Share your theories before Chapter 4. Our thoughts before the next chapter. The early morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dew-soaked flowers through the gardens of Aldridge Manor. Miss Marple, having spent the previous day analyzing the diary and observing the household, decided to explore the grounds herself. Gardens often held subtle clues, the misplaced footprints, a discarded item, or the faint scent of a visitor who should not have been there. She walked slowly along the cobblestone paths, her eyes scanning every detail. The gardeners were tending to the flower beds, though some moved hesitantly, aware of her presence. Miss Marple stopped near a hedge where she noticed a slight indentation in the soil, partially hidden beneath fallen leaves. The prints were small, delicate, likely belonging to a woman, and they led toward a secluded part of the garden seldom used by the household. Curious, she followed the trail and discovered a hidden bench beneath an old oak tree. On it lay a small handkerchief, embroidered with the initials C.A., Lady Constance Aldridge. The fabric was slightly damp from the morning dew. Miss Marple examined it carefully, noting a faint trace of perfume that did not belong to the heiress. "Someone has been here recently," she murmured to herself. Meanwhile, the household staff whispered among themselves, growing more uneasy with each passing hour. The maid, who had delivered Lady Constance's evening tea, admitted to overhearing hushed conversations in the garden late at night, voices that seemed urgent and worried. The gardener, Thomas, confessed that he had noticed a shadowy figure near the east wing windows, but had dismissed it as a passing villager. Miss Marple pieced together the garden clues with what she already knew. The small footprints, the handkerchief, and the faint perfume suggested that someone had visited Lady Constance secretly, perhaps in an attempt to lure her away or to leave a message unnoticed. As she examined the surroundings further, Miss Marple noticed the way certain branches were slightly bent, almost as if someone had brushed against them in haste. Even the alignment of flower pots and garden ornaments seemed slightly disturbed. Each small detail contributed to the picture of a carefully orchestrated intrusion, a silent conversation happening in the night, hidden from ordinary eyes. Later, she returned to the manor to compare her findings with the diary and other observations. Lady Constance had mentioned secret meetings in her entries, hinting at a stranger who had appeared at unexpected times, offering assistance or advice. Miss Marple now suspected that the garden had been the location of at least one such clandestine encounter. By mid-morning, she called Inspector Craddock to discuss her observations. "The garden," she said, "is more than just a scenic space. It is a stage for subtle communications, and it may well hold the key to understanding the disappearance. The footprints, the handkerchief, even the faint perfume, all point to a visitor with knowledge of the household's routines." As the chapter closed, Miss Marple looked out over the quiet garden, imagining the comings and goings of shadowy figures beneath the moonlight. The village seemed peaceful to outsiders, yet beneath that calm lay a network of secrets, carefully hidden. She realized that understanding these hidden movements would be essential in unraveling the mystery of the vanishing heiress. Who do you think visited Lady Constance in the garden, and what might have been their purpose? Share your thoughts before Chapter 5. The evening had settled over St. Mary Mead, and a cool breeze rustled through the village streets. The Aldridge Manor, once vibrant with the sounds of daily life, now carried an eerie stillness. Inside, Miss Marple continued her careful investigation, her mind weaving the threads of clues collected over the past days. The vanishing of Lady Constance had unsettled everyone, but Miss Marple's calm determination remained unshaken. Tonight, she focused on the manor's library, a room rarely disturbed except for formal occasions. The shelves were filled with dusty tomes, leather-bound volumes, and old ledgers. Yet it was not the books that captured her attention. It was the small, half-hidden compartment behind a row of legal documents. The compartment, barely noticeable, contained letters and photographs dating back decades, many bearing the Aldridge family seal. Among the letters, one particularly stood out. It had been written by a long-forgotten relative and contained cryptic instructions regarding the family estate and hidden legacies. Miss Marple read the faded handwriting carefully, realizing that these documents could be connected to the current mystery. Secrets of the past often cast long shadows into the present. And here, she suspected, lay a thread leading directly to Lady Constance's disappearance. Meanwhile, the household staff moved about nervously, aware that the detective was delving into matters beyond ordinary understanding. Mr. Hargreaves, the butler, approached cautiously, his eyes betraying both respect and apprehension. "Miss Marple," he whispered, "there are family stories, things we are not meant to speak of. Old grievances, disputes over inheritance. Could these be relevant?" Miss Marple nodded thoughtfully. "History often leaves footprints, Mr. Hargreaves. It is those footsteps that lead us to the present." Later, she walked through the long, dimly lit corridors, her keen eyes catching subtle details, a misplaced book, a faint smudge on the polished floor, and the lingering scent of a familiar perfume, one that seemed oddly out of place. These small observations, easily overlooked by others, formed a pattern in her mind. Each clue, no matter how minor, contributed to the unfolding story of Lady Constance's disappearance. A sudden sound, soft, deliberate, drew her attention. From behind the library door, a shadow moved. Miss Marple's heart did not race. Experience had taught her patience and precision. She stepped closer, peering into the dimly lit room, where a solitary figure appeared to be rifling through papers. The figure froze upon noticing her, then turned abruptly and vanished into a side corridor. Miss Marple followed carefully, her movements quiet and deliberate. In the corridor, she found a small, discarded key on the floor. Its shape was unusual, unlike any ordinary household key. She pocketed it, suspecting it might unlock a cabinet, a drawer, or perhaps a secret passage connected to the mystery. Returning to the library, she pieced together what she had discovered so far. Lady Constance had secrets of her own, meticulously documented in her diary. The mysterious visitor, Mr. Carrington, had arrived with an agenda hidden beneath polite words. And now, the traces of the past, the letters, photographs, and old grievances, intersected with the present, revealing a web of intrigue that spanned generations. By the end of the evening, Miss Marple sat quietly in the library, the flickering candlelight casting soft shadows across the walls. She contemplated the hidden connections, the motives, and the unseen hands shaping events in St. Mary Mead. The mystery was far from solved, but the threads were coming together. The Vanishing Heiress had drawn her into a story of deception, ambition, and long-buried secrets, and Miss Marple was determined to uncover every hidden truth. The afternoon sun had begun its slow descent, casting long shadows across the Aldridge manor. Miss Marple, having analyzed the garden clues and Lady Constance's diary, turned her attention to a part of the house often overlooked, the attic. Hidden away from the main living quarters, it had long served as a storage space for old trunks, forgotten furniture, and boxes of family papers. Yet Miss Marple knew that attics often held secrets that were deliberately or inadvertently concealed. She climbed the narrow staircase, each step creaking under her weight. The attic smelled of dust and aged wood, a mixture of forgotten years and long-stored memories.
Miss Marple paused, listening carefully. Even in the quiet of the manor, faint sounds could reveal much: the scuff of a shoe, the rustle of paper, or the soft whisper of movement. Rows of trunks lined the walls, each carefully locked or sealed. Miss Marple's keen eyes scanned for anything unusual. One trunk, larger than the others and marked with the initials CA, drew her attention. It had been slightly moved, leaving faint impressions on the floorboards.
She gently lifted the lid and found a collection of personal belongings, clothing, letters, and a small, locked box that did not appear in any inventory she had previously examined. Miss Marple's mind raced. The locked box was intriguing. Its size suggested something valuable or important, and its careful concealment indicated that someone had intended it to remain hidden. She noted the intricate lock and the way it had been slightly scratched, evidence that someone had tried to open it without success. While examining the trunk, she discovered a letter tucked beneath a stack of folded garments. It was addressed to Lady Constance, but unsigned. The letter's content was cryptic, warning of a secret that must remain hidden until the right moment, and urging caution regarding visitors to the manor. The handwriting was elegant, yet unfamiliar. Miss Marple carefully folded the letter and placed it in her pocket, recognizing its potential significance. As she continued to explore the attic, she noticed a loose floorboard near the far corner. Kneeling, she lifted it and found a small bundle wrapped in faded cloth. Inside were documents and a tiny key engraved with delicate markings. Miss Marple examined the key thoughtfully. It was similar in style to the one she had discovered earlier, suggesting a connection between these hidden items and the unfolding mystery. The silence of the attic was suddenly broken by the soft creak of the door. Miss Marple straightened, listening intently, but no one entered. Perhaps it was the wind, or perhaps someone was moving stealthily elsewhere in the manor. She knew better than to dismiss the possibility of an intruder. The threads of the mystery were growing ever more intricate. Returning to the diary and comparing the newly found documents, Miss Marple began to piece together a network of hidden correspondence and secret instructions, suggesting that Lady Constance had been aware of threats to her safety. The mysterious visitor, Mr. Carrington, the shadowy garden encounters, and the attic secrets all seemed interconnected. Someone was orchestrating a plan that spanned both time and space, relying on secrecy and deception to achieve their goal. By the time dusk settled over St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple had formulated a preliminary plan. She would investigate further, question the staff subtly, and examine the remaining hidden compartments in the manor. The vanishing of Lady Constance was no ordinary disappearance. It was part of a carefully orchestrated sequence of events, and Miss Marple intended to follow every lead to its conclusion. What do you think is inside the locked box? And who might have hidden it in the attic? Share your guesses before Chapter 7. Night had fallen over St. Mary Mead, and a gentle fog began to drift through the village streets, wrapping the manor in a soft, eerie veil. Inside Aldridge Manor, Miss Marple sat quietly in her favorite chair, the diary and letters spread before her. The clues were numerous, but she sensed that understanding the motives behind them was key to solving the mystery. The household staff moved about with subdued tension, aware that Miss Marple was piecing together events that had confounded even Inspector Craddock. The detective's mind, ever alert, began to consider the relationships within the Aldridge family and the servants who had long been part of the household. In a village like St. Mary Mead, Small grievances and long-held grudges often simmered quietly before erupting in unexpected ways.
Miss Marple recalled Lady Constance's diary entries that hinted at unease with certain staff members and subtle concerns about distant relatives. Could someone within the manor have orchestrated her disappearance to gain advantage, financial or otherwise? She examined the letters she had found in the attic again, noting cryptic references to inheritance, trust, and the timing of certain decisions. These were not random words. They pointed to calculated intent. Later, she took a quiet walk through the corridors, stopping near the servants' quarters. She spoke gently with the maid, Mrs. Perkins, who admitted to noticing that Mr. Hargreaves, the butler, had seemed unusually nervous these past few days. Though he was always a professional, Miss Marple had learned to trust her instincts, and this subtle unease did not escape her notice. Miss Marple's observations extended to the younger staff as well. Thomas, the gardener, had been hesitant to answer questions,
And Miss Marple now suspected his nervousness was more than shyness. It hinted at knowledge, perhaps of events he should not have witnessed. In a village where everyone knew everyone else, even the smallest piece of information could be critical. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the library door. It was Mr. Carrington, the solicitor. "I hope I'm not disturbing you, Miss Marple," he said politely.
"I thought you might appreciate some insight into Lady Constance's affairs."
Miss Marple welcomed him, but she observed carefully. His gestures, tone, and expressions were all measured, almost rehearsed. It was clear he was concealing more than he revealed. As he spoke of legal matters and inheritance, Miss Marple's mind mapped the possibilities. Could Mr. Carrington have a motive beyond the legal, perhaps seeking control over Lady Constance's estate? While he spoke, she subtly probed, asking questions about timing, previous visitors, and letters. His responses were careful, but cracks appeared. Hesitations, overly formal phrasing, and occasional shifts of the eyes. Miss Marple noted everything. These small signals often told more than words themselves. By midnight, Miss Marple had formed a hypothesis. Lady Constance's disappearance was not a spontaneous act. It was orchestrated, involving at least one person familiar with the household, and possibly someone with legal or financial motives. The diary, the attic documents, the garden clues, and Mr. Carrington's unexpected arrival all pointed to a plan carefully designed to remain hidden until the right moment. Before retiring for the night, Miss Marple stood at the window, gazing across the fog-shrouded village. St. Mary Mead appeared tranquil, but beneath the surface, hidden motives and secret intentions wove a web of intrigue. She knew the coming days would demand patience, subtlety, and sharp observation. The mystery was far from solved, yet with every clue uncovered, she drew closer to understanding the full picture. "Who do you think has the strongest motive for Lady Constance's disappearance? Share your theories before Chapter 8. The morning mist lingered over St. Mary Mead as Miss Marple made her way through the quiet village streets toward the Aldridge Manor. The previous days had revealed tantalizing clues, the attic discoveries, the mysterious visitor, and Lady Constance's diary. But now, the pieces of the puzzle seemed closer to falling into place. Today, Miss Marple hoped to uncover a revelation that would finally shed light on the heiress's vanishing. Inside the manor, the atmosphere was tense. The staff moved quietly, casting furtive glances at one another. Miss Marple began by retracing Lady Constance's known movements from the day of her disappearance, cross-referencing them with the diary and the subtle observations she had collected. Footprints, misplaced items, and overheard whispers. Every detail, however minor, seemed to connect to a larger, hidden narrative. While examining a study adjacent to the east wing, Miss Marple noticed a small envelope tucked behind a loose panel of the wall. It was addressed simply to her, in handwriting she immediately recognized as Lady Constance's. Inside, a note hinted at an impending danger and advised discretion. Trust no one fully, but observe carefully. The truth is closer than it seems. Miss Marple's sharp mind connected this to the garden footprints, the attic key, and the mysterious solicitor, Mr. Carrington. It was clear now that Lady Constance had anticipated potential threats and had left subtle guidance for anyone clever enough to follow her trail. The heiress had not vanished in fear or caprice. She had been drawn into a scheme carefully orchestrated by someone within her circle. Her investigation led her to the west wing of the manor, where a series of letters had been hidden in the back of a drawer. These letters revealed a long-standing rivalry over family inheritance, detailing grievances and ambitions spanning decades. Miss Marple realized that the vanishing was no ordinary disappearance. It was part of a calculated plan involving betrayal, secrecy, and manipulation. A sudden sound interrupted her thoughts. Soft footsteps approaching the hallway. Miss Marple instinctively retreated into the shadows and observed. It was Mr. Carrington, moving with careful purpose, seemingly unaware that someone was watching him. She noted the way he checked the drawers, lifted papers, and handled certain documents with deliberate caution. Clearly, he was searching for something specific. Miss Marple quietly returned to the diary, scanning its final entries. A passage stood out. Lady Constance had suspected that someone close to the household might attempt to manipulate events to gain advantage over her. She had cleverly hidden documents and clues in both the attic and the garden, ensuring that only a sharp observer could uncover them. Miss Marple smiled faintly. The heiress had prepared a trail, and it was now her turn to follow it. By late afternoon, the first unexpected revelation came into focus. Miss Marple discovered a series of correspondence indicating that Mr. Carrington's presence was not merely as a concerned solicitor. He had ties to a distant relative of the Aldridge family, someone who stood to gain greatly from Lady Constance's disappearance. The letters suggested collusion and a premeditated plan to mislead the household while securing financial advantage. As dusk fell, Miss Marple convened with Inspector Craddock, sharing her discoveries in careful detail. The mystery, she explained, is not only about Lady Constance's movements. It is about ambition, deception, and the lengths some will go to in order to secure what they desire. We must now consider who among those present has the most to gain and the cunning to execute such a plan. The fog deepened outside, and St. Mary Mead seemed to hold its breath. The quiet village, with its neatly trimmed hedges and peaceful facades, hid a labyrinth of secrets. Yet Miss Marple felt that the moment of truth was approaching. Every clue she had gathered, every subtle observation, was about to converge, bringing the shadowed intentions of the perpetrator into the light. Who do you think is working with Mr. Carrington, and what is their ultimate goal? Share your guesses before Chapter 9. Night had fully fallen over St. Mary Mead, and a cold wind swept through the village streets, rustling the branches of the tall oaks surrounding Aldridge Manor. Inside the manor, Miss Marple moved silently through the dimly lit corridors, diary and documents in hand. The threads of the mystery were beginning to intertwine, and she sensed that the truth, long hidden, was finally within reach. The evening was tense. The household staff were aware of her presence and her keen observation, though none could guess the depths of her deductions. Even Inspector Craddock, competent and experienced, deferred to her judgment as they pieced together the clues she had gathered over the past days. Miss Marple began by revisiting the east wing. The window, previously disturbed, now seemed less like a point of entry and more like a staging ground.
used perhaps to create the illusion of a hurried escape. The footprints in the garden, the hidden letters, and the diary entries all pointed to a plan that had relied on misdirection. Someone had intended for suspicion to fall in one direction, while the true scheme unfolded elsewhere. Her observations led her to the library, where Mr. Carrington had been seen earlier. She noted the small scratches on the drawers and the faint scent of a distinct perfume, not Lady Constance's. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it confirmed her suspicion. Mr. Carrington was not acting alone. Someone else within the manor had aided him, moving quietly and carefully to maintain the illusion of Lady Constance's disappearance. Miss Marple then gathered the household staff, questioning them gently yet deliberately. Each answer revealed subtle inconsistencies, small hesitations, and nervous glances that, together, formed a map of hidden actions. One detail stood out: a late-night delivery to the West Wing, reported by the cook, which no one had thought significant at the time. Miss Marple realized this could be the key that connected the solicitor's movements to the family's hidden documents. With careful reasoning, she began to reconstruct the timeline. Lady Constance had been lured into a temporary concealment, not out of fear, but for the purpose of safeguarding her property and revealing the true motives of those who sought to manipulate her. The heiress had anticipated potential betrayal, and through her diary and cleverly hidden letters, had created a trail for someone perceptive enough to follow. The revelation crystallized when Miss Marple confronted Mr. Carrington and the implicated household member together. She laid out the evidence: the attic documents, the hidden key, the footprints, the garden handkerchief, and the inconsistencies in their statements. With calm precision, she explained how each piece of the puzzle fit, exposing the collusion that had orchestrated Lady Constance's temporary vanishing. Both Mr. Carrington and his accomplice tried to deny their involvement, but the evidence was irrefutable. Miss Marple's methodical approach, her careful attention to subtle clues, and her understanding of human nature had unmasked their intentions. Their plan to exploit Lady Constance for financial gain had been cleverly executed, but not cleverly enough to escape the scrutiny of the sharp-eyed detective. By the end of the night, Lady Constance was safely reunited with the household, having been hidden away just long enough to protect her from the schemers. The villagers, unaware of the near danger, continued their routines, oblivious to the layers of intrigue that had unfolded behind the manor walls. Miss Marple, seated once more in her chair, reflected on the case. The web of deception had been intricate, relying on misdirection, secrecy, and the cunning of those who thought they could outsmart both the law and common sense. Yet, patience, observation, and a deep understanding of human nature had brought the truth to light. Were you able to guess who was behind Lady Constance's disappearance before it was revealed? Comment your answer before the final chapter. The dawn broke over St. Mary Mead with a gentle golden light, casting the village in an aura of calm. Inside Aldridge Manor, the tension that had gripped the household for days had finally lifted. Lady Constance Aldridge, safely returned to her quarters, radiated relief, while Miss Marple, ever composed, quietly reflected on the resolution of yet another intricate case. The previous night had revealed the full extent of the deception. Mr. Carrington, the cunning solicitor, had conspired with a trusted member of the household to orchestrate Lady Constance's disappearance, intending to manipulate the estate for personal gain. Yet their carefully laid plans had unraveled under Miss Marple's perceptive eye. Every footprint, misplaced item, and cryptic letter had been examined and interpreted, revealing the truth hidden beneath layers of secrecy. Miss Marple had convened a discreet meeting with Inspector Craddock and the household staff. She recounted the events step by step, explaining how each clue, the garden handkerchief, the attic key, the diary entries, and the unusual footprints, had led to the identification of the culprits. The revelation brought a mixture of shock and relief to the staff, who had long been unaware of the depth of the plot unfolding under their very noses. Lady Constance, grateful for Miss Marple's intervention, expressed her thanks with warmth and sincerity. "I feared the worst," she said, her voice quivering. "But you have restored not only my safety, but my faith in the kindness and intelligence of those around me." Miss Marple smiled, her gaze soft yet penetrating. "Sometimes, Lady Constance, the most intricate puzzles lie not in the unknown, but within the familiar, the people and places we trust. Observation, patience, and understanding human nature are often the keys to uncovering hidden truths." As the morning progressed, the villagers of St. Mary Mead carried on with their daily routines, blissfully unaware of the drama that had nearly touched their quiet village. The manor, now peaceful, stood as a testament to the subtle battle between deception and clarity, secrecy and revelation. Inspector Craddock prepared the official report, carefully documenting the case for legal proceedings, while Miss Marple took a moment to savor the satisfaction of another mystery resolved. The vanishing heiress had returned, the culprits exposed, and justice quietly restored. Yet even in the calm, Miss Marple knew that the village still held secrets. Every smile, every polite conversation, every quiet gesture could hide a story waiting to be discovered. St. Mary Mead was serene, but beneath its tranquil surface lay a web of human nature, sometimes benevolent, sometimes cunning, always fascinating. As the day drew to a close, Miss Marple stood in the garden, gazing at the horizon. The manor and village bathed in the soft glow of sunset, a sense of resolution settling over her. She understood that mysteries would always arise, but with keen observation and understanding of human nature, even the most elusive secrets could be uncovered. "The mystery is solved." Did you guess the culprits correctly? And were you following the clues along with Miss Marple? Share your thoughts. And so, the mystery of the vanishing heiress comes to a close. Lady Constance is safe, the culprits exposed, and justice quietly restored within the walls of Aldridge Manor. But as always in St. Mary Mead, beneath the calm surface, human nature weaves its intricate patterns. Curiosity, ambition, and secrecy never fully rest. Miss Marple, ever observant and thoughtful, reminds us that even in the quietest of villages, vigilance and understanding can reveal the hidden truths. Every detail matters, every gesture tells a story, and patience often uncovers what the eye alone cannot see. Thank you for following this journey through secrets, shadowy motives, and clever deception. Remember, the world of St. Mary Mead is full of mysteries, and there is always more to discover for those who look carefully. Did you enjoy unraveling the mystery alongside Miss Marple? Which clue or twist surprised you the most? Comment below and share your favorite moment.